Hi, I'm Jeff DeRiso from Beckman Collaborative, and today I'm going to show you how to automatically generate and send QuickBooks invoices from a unique form submission. We'll use a simple sign-up form in Zoho Forms, and then use Zoho Flow to automate the QuickBooks invoicing process without writing any code. Zoho Flow allows us to create complex automation workflows that can trigger a sequence of actions across multiple third-party applications. Let me show you how it works. Here we are in Zoho Forms, and this is an example form that I created. Let's say we are promoting a new training program, and we want to send this form to our existing and past clients first to give them early sign-up access before we open it to the general public. So you can see we have a name and last name field and email field that are disabled. We have our date for the training. We've selected a custom range from March 11th to March 29th, only on business days. And we have a training type. We have a half day and a full day option. And then we have this Zoho CRM field here. That's one of our advanced field options. And that is a native integration between Zoho CRM and Zoho Forms. So if we drag that field in, like I have here, we go to Edit. You see that I have a field map here. So when we email our Zoho form to our existing CRM contact, their first and last name and email address will be pre-filled in those fields. And it's also going to bring in their CRM contact ID. And that's going to help us in a later step in the process. And then all they have to do is select their date and training type and submit the form. And these fields down here are hidden because we're just using these on the back end to do our integrations in the next steps. So we've sent this to our contact. They've selected a date. They've selected whether they want a half day or full day training. And when they hit submit on this form, what we want to do is send them an invoice for a 20% deposit for their training. So sometimes in business, you have different departments that are working on different software applications. And let's say, for example, that your sales team is working in Zoho applications, but your finance team is working in QuickBooks. In that case, we would have to use a tool like Zoho Flow to integrate these applications together. So you see, if I go to this integrations tab here, I haven't set anything up. And the reason for that is QuickBooks is not one of our predefined integration options here. The other limitation of this integrations tab is that you can only integrate the form with one service at a time. So, for example, if I chose Zoho CRM, I couldn't also integrate with Zoho Click or Google Sheets. So you can only choose one. And that is where Zoho Flow comes in. Okay, so here we are in Zoho Flow. This is a service that allows us to create automated workflows that go across applications. So the first thing we need to do to create our workflow is to create a connection. So we go to Settings, Connections, and you see we have several connections already set up here. Connections are a way to authorize communications between our applications. So in order to make this workflow work, we need to set up 3 connections. We need to set up a connection with Zoho Forms, a connection with Zoho CRM, and a connection with QuickBooks. So we already have those set up, but if you wanted to create a new connection, you could click Create Connection, and then you just choose your service. Click Next. You give your connection a name, and then you click Authorize. And we've already done this step, so I'm just going to click the X. So now that we've created our connections with Zoho Forms, with Zoho CRM, and with QuickBooks, we're ready to create our invoice automation flow. So let's click the plus sign here, Create Flow, give it a name. Give it a description. Click Create. Okay, so first we need to choose what triggers our flow. And in this case, we're going to choose App because it's an event that's in an application, Zoho Forms. So we'll click Configure, and we'll choose Zoho Forms. And we want to select entry submitted. That is what's going to trigger our flow here. Click next. Choose our connection. We choose our form from this dropdown. Book your training. We can also choose filter criteria if we don't want to send invoices to every submission, but in this case we do. So we're going to leave the filter criteria blank and we'll click done. Okay, so now we've set up our trigger. So the next thing we want to do is actually pull this person's contact record from the CRM, because we want to use information about that to do later steps like creating the invoice and filling their mailing address, for example. So we're going to select Zoho CRM from the apps menu here. And click the drop down. And we will say fetch contact. Choose the connection. And let's give our variable a name here. Fetch CRM contact. And the way we're going to fetch that is by using the form submission entry. So all we have to do is click this field here, get our first name, get the last name, and we just click each field from our form submission and our contact ID, which is a foolproof way to make sure that we're getting the correct record in the CRM, because people can have the same last name or maybe even email address, but the contact ID is always going to be unique. So let's use that CRM contact ID from our form, and then we'll click done. So that's using the information submitted in the form to pull the entire contact record from the CRM. You could also pull the company record if you wanted to get information about that company. The next thing we need to do is check in our QuickBooks to see if this contact is already a customer in our QuickBooks application. Because if it's not, we're going to need to create a new one. So let's go to type in QuickBooks here. Select our dropdown and scroll down to fetch customer by name or email and drag that as the next step in our flow. We'll choose our connection at the top. We'll give our variable a name. And we'll use the email address from our CRM and their first and last name. And this is going to check QuickBooks to see if this record exists. So we click done. So now we've gone to QuickBooks to check for that customer. Now, based on the response that we get from QuickBooks, we're going to need to branch this workflow to two separate branches. So to do that, we're going to go to Logic and Decision, and we'll make that the next step in our flow. So the way we decide that is by going to this drop down here and going down to our fetch customer by name or email. These are all the fields that are associated with the customer in QuickBooks. And then we go to customer ID. And if the customer ID is not null, that means the customer does exist in QuickBooks. So we'll click done. So let's name our decision. So now we have two different branches here. So if this condition is met, we go this way, and if it's not, we go this way. So if the answer is no, if the customer does not exist, what do we need to do? We need to create a customer in QuickBooks. So I'll go to the apps and I'll select QuickBooks and create customer. Choose our connection, create new. Now we can just take our information from our CRM contact record and insert it into the mandatory fields or any of the fields that we want to. So for the display name, I'll just use the first and last. You can do it from our form submission as well, because it's already synced with the CRM. Let's look for mandatory fields here. We'll make it active. We can do our address from our contact field if we want to, and also the primary email address. The same one that's synced from CRM to the forms. We can get it from the form or the CRM. It doesn't matter because they will be the same. So I don't see any other mandatory fields here. Again, we could put the address in if we wanted to. We can put any other information based on our settings in QuickBooks here. I'll just click done. So now we've checked in QuickBooks if the customer exists, and if they don't, now we've created a new customer with the correct first, last name, and email address. So now we're almost ready to create an invoice, but we need to do one more decision. So we'll go to Logic, Decision again. And now we need to decide, did they sign up for a full day training or a half day training? So we get our form entry here, training type equals, and we type in the value. And we need to make sure this value exactly matches up with the one in our Zoho form. So if you don't remember, go back to your Zoho form and check. Say premium full day. Okay, and this is case sensitive. So again, make sure that you get the exact string of text or this decision will not work correctly. So if the training type equals premium, then go one way. And if it doesn't, go another way. Okay, we'll name this decision. Type is premium. So now we're ready to create our invoice. Now first, let's create an invoice for the full day training. So we'll drag it over here, choose our connection, create full day invoice. Okay. And we'll choose our customer, the one that we just created. Custom value, and we'll choose the customer ID of the customer that we just created. And this is why those variable names are important, because we see that we're putting our new QuickBooks customer ID here, the one that we just created in the previous step. Now we can add any other fields we want. We can put the due date, for example, take a system variable, the current date. So that what that means is whenever this person submits this form, the due date and also the invoice date can be the current date, whatever date they filled out that form. So that means we're going to send it to them right away. So the date should be the date they filled out the form, right? Now we'll just make sure that we check and we fill all our mandatory fields here. We've got our customer and our sales item. Now this is dynamically pulling from our QuickBooks, our sales items. So you select, I'm just going to select sales. It's just a blanket item that can be used for anything. And we want our line amount to be 20% of our total training cost. So let's say, for example, this full day training is $1,700. So that means our 20% deposit is going to be $340. So we type in $340. Okay, and then we'll click done. So now we need to create an invoice for the same customer if they selected half day. So instead of going through all those steps again, what we can do is click these three dots here on this create invoice, and we'll clone it. And we'll attach it to the other branch of this decision. Now let's rename these so we can differentiate. And we'll go into the settings of the half day. We'll change the variable name. We have the same customer reference value. And now we have the same dates. Our dates have been carried over because we cloned it. And our line amount needs to change to 170 because our half day training is $850 and 20% of that is $170. So now we click done. So now we've created our invoices for either a full day or half day, depending on what the original form submission was. Now we need to create another step that sends the invoices that were just created. Go to QuickBooks and send invoice. And this is our full day. So we want to specify. Now the email address we'll take from the form submission again, or from the CRM, either way. And we can also choose our invoice here. Now we want to choose a custom value again. Custom value. And we want to choose the full day invoice that we created in the previous step. So we look at the fields here and we choose invoice ID. And we have our full day invoice ID variable there. And you can see I made a spelling error, but that's okay. Then we'll click done. So now we can clone this and attach it to the half day invoice. Let's rename. And we'll go into the settings. And instead of our full day invoice, we want to get our half day invoice and the invoice ID. Here's our half day invoice ID variable, and that will be filled there. And click done. Okay, so now if our customer does not exist, we've created a new customer. We've checked if the training is full day or half day, and we've created and sent an invoice based on what the selection was. So now we can quickly copy these same actions for what happens if the customer already does exist in QuickBooks. So the first thing we'll do, since we don't need to create a customer now, the first thing we'll do is copy our training type decision, clone that, and we'll add that right after our previous decision. So if the customer does exist, we then go directly to checking for full or half day. And then we'll simply copy these and attach them to the right branches of the additional decision. Now let's go in the settings and make sure we have everything right. So we don't want our new customer ID here for the custom value. We want our existing customer, the one that we fetched when we looked for it. So we'll get the customer ID from the existing QuickBooks customer here. Everything else is the same as the way we had it before. The line amount is $340, which is correct for our full day invoice. We'll click done. And we'll make sure that this invoice is sending the correct one. Now, instead of our full day invoice 1, we want to send our full day invoice 2, this one that we've created previously. We'll select that. Full day invoice 2, another spelling mistake. We're getting the ID of that invoice and we're passing it as the custom value for which invoice we're sending. So now we can click done again. And we'll just repeat that same thing for our half days. And again, we'll change the customer value to the existing customer. And everything else will stay the same. We'll click done. And make sure this correct invoice is being sent. Half day invoice 2, the second one that we created here. Invoice ID. Half day invoice 2, the one in the previous step. We have to pull it from the one in the previous step or else it won't work. So that's why those variable names are important. We'll click done. Now we've set up our entire flow to automate sending an invoice on a form submission. Now, the other thing we can do is, this is looking a little cluttered, so we can click up here, auto arrange, and that makes it a little cleaner to look at. Some of you may think that that looks better or worse. It's up to you. You can arrange it however you want it. So now that that's done, all we have to do is activate our flow, turn it on here. And now our flow has been switched on, so we can go test it. Here we are in our email template screen in Zoho CRM. So this is how I'm going to send a link to the form to our contacts. We've created this email template for this training, gives the dates and information about pricing and the 20% deposit. And you can see at the bottom, we have this register now button. So if we click edit and we look at the settings of this button, we have our Zoho Forms form as the link. When our contact clicks on this register now button, they're going to get sent to this Zoho form that we created, and their name and email is going to be pre-filled. So let's trigger an email to show how that works. Okay, here we are in our test contact in our CRM, and let's click send email. And then we'll select insert template, test tutorial, the one we just created. Okay, and looks good. So let's hit send. Okay, so here I am in my email, and now you see that I've received our test email announcing the training. And when I click this button, register now, it takes me to the Zoho form with my contact name and email address pre-filled. So now I can select my date for March 12th. We'll select a half-day training and we'll click submit. And it gives us this thank you screen that says an invoice has been sent to you for the 20% deposit. Please pay within 2 business days to ensure your time slot is reserved. So now let's check for that invoice. So here we are a few seconds later in my email, and here's our invoice. Our invoice for the correct half-day amount is ready. Dear, and it has our name here, and then we can click this link to pay it. So now we're back in Zoho Flow, and we see that we've had our success. And here we have recent executions, and we can go to history. Let's click on our flow history here. So now this gives us each step in our flow, and it tells us the input and the output. Okay, so if you have a failure for some reason in your flow, this is where you're going to troubleshoot it, because you're going to be able to see the data that was passed on each step. You can see we got the contact record here successfully, and we checked if there was a customer. And in this case, a customer did exist because I already tested this flow the other day. So this customer already did exist in QuickBooks. So then we went to our next decision and we checked, was it a full day or half day? And we can see default means no, it was not a full day. So we created our half day invoice with the correct values here. And then we sent that exact same invoice to that same email address. So that's how you create an automated QuickBooks invoice from a form submission using Zoho Flow. Now, if I were using this process in an actual business, I would probably also want to create a flow that is triggered when the customer pays the invoice. We may, for example, want to send a thank you message, and we want to ensure them that their time slot is now booked. We may also want to book a time slot in either as a meeting in CRM or possibly in our Zoho projects. And because we're using Zoho Flow, we can trigger as many actions in as many apps as we want to, as long as we've established the connection first. Zoho Flow is included in the Zoho One bundle. So if you are a Zoho One subscriber, you do have access to Zoho Flow. You have the ability to connect many different applications together on a single workflow and create really a seamless experience for your customer, because as soon as they submit that form, they're going to immediately get that email that sends them the invoice. And then if you set up your second flow, they'll immediately get a confirmation message upon payment of that invoice. When finances are involved, you always want to test things first on a test contact in our CRM before we go live with it, just like the way you saw me do it. And of course, if you need further support in creating a flow, you can contact Beckman Collaborative. Please leave any questions you have in the comments and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.